Of yours, that fencing hobby, how much of that came into play when you started writing your books?
A lot of it. It was I call some of my books my Julie Andrews books. It's a few of my favorite things, So I put sword fighting. There's basically a database of authors and narrators, and
Right.
you can put up a sample and offer like, hey, this is what I'm willing to pay for someone to do my
Mm-hmm.
audiobook. And if a narrator is interested, they'll read your sample and you can look at that as an audition. And so it's,
Oh, this is drudgery. I don't like this part.
yeah.
And so sometimes I will find excuses.
Do you dream of adding your very own book to the collection of books that have already been written? Do you wonder where to start or how to finish? Does the idea of writing a book seem too overwhelming? Do you just want to polish up those writing skills or stay motivated? Do you wonder what to write about? Everything you need to help you write, stay motivated, and self publish your own book is right here on one channel. And why? Well, because it's time to get over the writer's hump and just do it. You can write anything. Yep, you can write a book.
Hello. Welcome to a book. I'm so glad you're here. We have a fantastic show for you today. I have an exciting author with me. His name is Patrick LeClerc, and Patrick is here today to talk to you all about the writing process, all about his book, and all about the things that he has going on. Patrick, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I know you and I had a brief conversation before we decided to do this podcast together. But I would really like for you to sort of refresh my memory and also tell the audience a little about yourself and about what you've written.
Okay. So I've been my full-time job, I'm a paramedic. I've been a paramedic for 25 years. And that's what I do to pay the bills. And I've been writing, um, I've been writing pretty constantly ever since I was in college, but I started writing and publishing. My first book came out in 2012, I want to say. So I've been publishing for about 12 years now. I have seven novels out right now and some short stories in various places. And in other news, I do a lot of fencing. I have a history degree. Um, I brew my own beer. I like to cook. So
You're a
I have
well-rounded
a lot
kind
of
of
stuff
person.
going on.
You're very well-rounded. Tell me
That's
about
true.
this fencing because I know once upon a time my husband and I took fencing lessons, and what I remember of that was that it's a lot more exercise than people realize, and my legs got really tired.
Oh, it is. So I started fencing in college because it was offered as a class and I thought it sounded like a lot of fun. And it was. And I did, basic collegiate fencing, the white suits and
Okay.
foils. Um, all through college, I did pretty well. I placed in some competitions and I still do it from time to time. Since that, and that was back, I was in college in the late 80s. Since that time, I've gotten involved in some Society for Creative Anachronism, some rapier fencing, which is less rules and slightly more realistic weapons and a little bit more of a historical feel to it. And I've also done
Interesting.
some historical European martial arts, which is again, fencing is a sport that developed from sword fighting, and it's a lot of fun, but it's very much a sport. HEMA is historical European martial arts. HEMA is more of a I call it physical archaeology. We're trying to use the weapons and see how they were used and how it worked. It's basically since I was a little kid and I used to fight with my friends with sticks in the woods. I've never really outgrown that.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so
Yeah, who
it's
does,
just
right?
now we just have
Yeah.
more expensive sticks.
More,
And it takes
very
us longer to
expensive
heal
sticks.
afterwards because we're old.
Okay, so question then, how much of that hobby of yours, that fencing hobby, how much of that came into play when you started writing your books?
A lot of it. It was I call some of my books my Julie Andrews books. It's a few of my favorite things, So I put sword fighting and history and science fiction and social commentary, and usually I pull in some medical stuff from my paramedic side of it. But I write a lot of fantasy with a lot of sword fighting in it, and I try to make that feel pretty real and be historical enough without bogging down in technical details, which is a pitfall that you
Are
can.
you pretty technical?
I try not to be. I've gotten less technical in my writing when I write fight scenes because most people don't want they're more it's more about the the feeling and the emotion of a fight than the really nitty-gritty specific. And then he disengaged in tierce and did and you wind up sounding like Daffy Duck with a guard turn, parry, thrust,
You
kind of
know,
thing. So I try to keep
and
it.
I think there's definitely a place for technical writing,
Yeah,
and maybe fantasy and sci-fi is not the place to go overboard with that. But I can imagine that that's only helped enhance some of, because even sci-fi or fantasy has to have an element of belief to it. People
exactly.
have to be able to buy into the story. And so if you can bring some of that technical knowledge with you into your writing, that only makes it more believable.
I think so. And like I said, it lets me indulge my little hobbies,
That's pretty
kind of let them
cool.
cross-pollinate, and that's
Nice. So Patrick, when did you first start writing?
so I always liked creative writing in school. I think my first moment that I realized, wow, we can do this was when I read The Hobbit in probably fifth grade
Oh,
because
wow.
it was just I didn't know before then I just read, stuff for school and typical stuff, but it was my first actual fantasy book. And I'm like, wow, this guy created a whole different world and there's knights and dragons and elves and we can actually do that. So through school I really enjoyed creative writing. It was one of the things I put a lot of time into. And then when I went to college, I was a history major, but I took a lot of writing courses and literature courses on the side because I've always enjoyed it. And then later on in the 90s, a couple of friends of mine, who also were writing on the side, we started formed a little writers group, a pre-internet writers group. We used to meet at Barnes and Noble and pass around photocopied stuff and read our
How
stuff and critique
fun.
it.
How fun.
So I've been writing all along. Back in 1999, two friends and I founded a short story speculative fiction magazine called Quantum Muse, where people could submit short stories and we'd publish them. And I think we paid like $10 a story. It wasn't much.
Wow.
But it was in the like early internet age. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. And then gradually people kind of drifted away from it, but I met a lot of writers through that. We published a lot of fun stuff, and it was a window into seeing what they're dealing with a slush pile and dealing with that kind of thing was. So it was an interesting take on it. My first book that I published was my EMS themed urban fantasy Out of Nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
And that
Wow.
was I was chipping away at writing. I wanted to write. I'd been working on the ambulance for a couple of years at that point. I wanted to write an ambulance story, and I tried to write a straight, um, ambulance story narrative. But I was struggling with it, and at the same time, I was working on a fantasy thing, and I decided to meld them and make it an urban fantasy where the main character is a paramedic. And it worked really well.
Wow.
And that one I was writing that I started writing it in 2007. It published in 2012. Because at the time, we just my son was born in 2007. So I was busy. I was working full time and we had a kid. I was writing in little snatched bits of free time. It was my first novel, so I was making it up as I was learning a lot of stuff as I went. So it was like a 5-year process before I got that
Oh my goodness.
um,
Wow.
published.
What was your process? Like, I know that you said you had to just sort of snatch time where you could, but did you, when you sat down to write, had you already formed an outline, or are you one of these writers who just sits down and writes whatever comes to you?
I I tried to do an outline and I struggle with it. So I kind of write what comes to me. What usually happens is I'll have an idea, and that's usually either character or a character in a situation, and I'll write that scene. And then as I write that, it'll raise questions and it'll give me insight into, okay, all right, so this is how this person is. He's in this situation. All right, so what got him there? All right, now I have to write what
Oh,
got him there. All right, and what would you do from this point? And it kind of builds out. The problem with writing it that way, it's fun to write. It's dynamic. You can sit down, you're playing with it. I call it my blitzkrieg theory of writing. I just keep moving. I go
just
around the
keep
hard parts
going. Mhm.
and I get it to a full story. Then afterwards, you have to look at it and look at where the shape is. And then it's a lot more work on the editing end. Whereas if I had done an outline, I would probably save myself a lot of effort on that end. But I struggle with an outline because I don't know how the story is going to end when I come up with it. I know, oh, it's a story about this character and this is what he's got to deal with. And I learn the ending by writing it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I it I can't tell.
I'm not an outline
Yeah,
writer either.
yeah,
And for me, it's I just sort of write as it comes to me. I do have
yeah,
the ending in mind usually when I start a story. I have the beginning and the ending. It's the middle part that I struggle with.
yeah,
But I think, and I don't know, I haven't written a series, so maybe that would change things. But I think if I wrote an outline, if I was better at that, then I would keep better track of my characters. So I'm in the middle of a book right now. In fact, I was writing earlier today, and I thought, oh shoot, did I just change the last name of one of my characters? And I had to go back and look. And so I lack some consistency, and it makes editing a little bit more challenging because of
yeah.
that.
I always keep a
Oh,
notes file,
I should do
like a
that. I
separate
really
folder.
should.
And
I'm
when I
too
write
lazy.
something, just I don't pre-write it, but when I introduce a character, I'll go to the notes and I'll write Joe Smith, you know, middle manager at Wendy's, who was introduced in this book. And that way, if I go a couple chapters and I don't mention, I'm like, who is the manager? And I can go back. But people used to. One of the things we joked about, my friends and I was writing this fantasy story years and years ago before I published anything. And there was again, I was writing it in my free time and I wrote part of it. And then I didn't have a chance. I was in school. I was getting my paramedic. I didn't have a chance to write for like months and months. And I went back and I wrote the next scene. And I had changed seasons and I'd forgotten all about it. Like they're in the
Oh,
snow and then the snow was gone. And he's like, so when he started this
yeah. Where's the
scene in the
snow?
snow, I'm like, it was a sudden spring. I don't know, man. It just happened.
Just, yeah.
But so it is keeping consistent is hard, especially if you've got a lot of stuff going on with your writing.
And if you're a sporadic writer.
Yeah.
I
And I
think
think
that I think that people who have the luxury of writing the same time
mm,
every day or every week or whatever it is, they don't lose as much track. For me, I have to go back and I have to read the previous chapter before I can start the next one
yeah.
because enough time has usually gone by that I don't remember exactly what it was that I was writing last.
Yeah, that's definitely I think the case because And you see a lot of things, a lot of advice. Oh, you have to write every day, or you have to write at the same time, and that's not feasible for everybody. That might that might be helpful. And I've always said I can't tell people how to write. I can tell people how I write,
Very
and if
good.
they take something from it, that's great. But I've always, like I said, when I started working on it out of nowhere, I was working a full-time job, a part-time job, and I had a newborn at home because my wife and I, we bought our house. We had a baby and bought a house in 2007, and in 2008, the economy disintegrated.
Mhm. Oh boy.
So it was one of those where we were kind of scrambling, and I was working all the hours I could get to try to make that up. And I decided at that point, you know what? Why not write a novel? Because in my copious free time. So that one was just little blocks of time chiseled out, while he was taking a nap, kind of thing. And it got written. I'd write a little bit this week, and then I might write nothing next week, and then I'd have a really good week after that. So there was no consistency. But I don't reading that book versus my later books, I don't think I see an effect in the final product of that. I think it was more of a process, but I think you can get there either
Yeah.
way. It's just,
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like what you said that you can't tell somebody how to write a book, but you can tell them how you wrote the book. And the writing process is unique to everybody. I know that there are people who are they're very strict. This is how it has to be done if you're going to stay motivated.
yeah,
And maybe that's true for them, but if I get locked in like that, I tend to lose motivation.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think everybody is different. It just depends on how you function. But on that note, how do you stay motivated?
That's never been a that in and of itself has never been a problem because I'm always telling stories to myself. I'm always coming up with stories. I'm always thinking of stuff. It's the the only problem I get into is sometimes I'll run into blocks. I think we all kind of do. And I'll run into, I don't know how to resolve this thing, or I'll lose interest in something and I'll get it distracted by the shiny lights and get interested in something else. But I've always got a couple of those stories bubbling around. So it's not, if anything, my problem is getting the discipline to sit down and write it versus the inspiration. The inspiration is always kind of there.
Boy, I really identify with that. Yeah. Yeah. For me, it, it's that long middle. I
Yeah.
get really excited about starting the book
Yep.
and I know how it's going to end. I know where I want to go, but sometimes it's just, as you get into the middle of the book and you're having to just sort of do those transitions and move the
Yeah.
characters from one scene to the next. That's where I'm like, oh, this is drudgery. I don't like this part.
Yep.
And so sometimes I will find excuses not to sit down and write. I just recently had a writing clinic day with my friend and editor who's also an author. And we said, you know what? We both are working on some books that we've been working on for a while that we should have had done by now. Let's just sit down and have a writing day. No matter how hard it is, we're going to get through the tough stuff. And we did. And it just, for me, it was great. It was like a shot in the arm and it
Yeah.
just propelled me. And since then, for the last probably week or so, I've just been writing feverishly and I can see the horizon. Everything's there,
Yeah.
and I'm just about to the end. So it's good. It's all,
Momentum is definitely a thing. Once you get it's much easier to keep going than
yeah,
it is to get going.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
once you
absolutely.
once you get moving, it's much easier. It's sometimes you sit down and you're like and you just stare at the blank page. But once you get some traction, it's easier to keep going.
I think I regurgitate a lot. Like I will word vomit, I will get
Yep.
everything out, and then I go back and I edit, I edit as I go to an
Yeah.
extent. I'm not talking about big edits. I'm not talking about all of the mistakes, but I just the other day I was really excited about my word count and then I'm rereading it. I thought, oh, I don't like that paragraph. It's gone, and I just deleted
Yep.
it right from there. Do you find yourself doing that?
I do. I do. I'll go over and I do tend to reread my last chapter before I write my next one. And that every time I reread something, I'm making tweaks to it.
Yeah, yeah.
I try not to get too in the weeds on it because it's very easy to rewrite chapter 1 7 times and never get
And
to
then you
chapter
never
2.
get done, right? Yeah. Perfection.
So
I always say perfection is the enemy of progress.
yeah. So I
Mhm.
try to keep focused on keep moving, and I do edit a little bit as I go. But I try to keep that forward momentum.
So let's go back to talking about your first book. You
Yep.
wrote this thing. Once you had your manuscript, what did you do?
So I shopped it around to a bunch of my friends who were writers, and at the time there was an online literary community, Litopia, and I don't know the status of it now. It was a UK based, and it was you could submit chapters, and people would agree to read them and give critiques on it. And through that, I met a bunch of people that later on kind of formed a separate um, little group, and we our goal was to help one another publish our books. And because we were all writers, and some of us had different um, skills, there were a couple of people who worked writing copy professionally and doing editing professionally. So we kind of did a cooperative publishing
Interesting.
thing where a bunch of us all kind of worked on our books. If you were a writer, these people would beta read, these people would proofread, these people would work on stuff. We had some graphic people in there who would do covers, and it worked really well for a little while. And then one of the founding members who was really kind of the glue, he died. He had
Oh,
and there were differences in the usual garage band creative difference kind of thing, and everybody kind of went off their own way, but it was tremendously helpful at the
what a
time. So
learning. Yeah, I would think
it
that'd
was
be
a
a
strong
huge
group to
learning process.
yeah, it was a strong group to lean on. And that's one of the great things about technology today is you can find your people. They're out there someplace. And it was harder back in the day when you were like putting up a poster at the local library, hey, writers group next Tuesday. But now you can go online and find people, and you can find people in your genre, in your subgenre, who share influences and ideas, and that's tremendously helpful. No, it's as writers, it's weird because we work in a vacuum, sort of. When we're writing, we're alone. It's all us. But you don't see the flaws in your own writing. You need somebody else to look at it. You definitely need somebody else to edit it, because I will read past a typo a dozen times in
Oh,
my
I am so glad you said that because I
because I know
am
what I
I
meant.
am always right, exactly. And we get blind to our own stuff. I say it all the time,
Yeah.
almost every episode on here. You have to have a second or even a third set of eyeballs on that thing because I've read my stuff 100 times and it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it makes sense to somebody else. And
Yeah.
we just go blind to it. We just do.
Yeah. And then and I did do the whole kind of query letter thing for a little while, looked at traditional publishing, but it didn't, and I don't want to make broad sweeping statements because everybody's journey is different. It felt like you're doing a lot of the same work to not have your book out there. You still have to do all the same, all
Yeah.
the marketing, you still have to do all that. Whereas if you do it independently,
Mhm.
you have a lot more creative freedom. And now with print on demand, there's no more, it's not the gatekeepers that we used to have to deal with. You can put
Right.
stuff out. And yeah, you have to do your own marketing, but you're gonna have to do that anyway. And yeah, you're gonna have to either get somebody to edit or pay for editing. But
Yeah.
it's
I'm a real big proponent, and people who watch the show know that. I'm a real big proponent of self-publishing. I'm not saying that traditional publishing is bad or it's not the way to go, but I think that we live in a day and age where you no longer need permission to write. I say this
Exactly.
all the time. And for what you go through to get a publisher to look at your manuscript and approve it, and then the changes sometimes that they want you to make. And you said it yourself, the promoting that you have to do at the end, the marketing that you have to do when it's all said and done, just for them to take a bigger cut and you're doing the same work than if you had just self-published yourself to
Yeah.
begin with. So I just think that times have changed. Times have definitely changed. It used to be there was such a stigma around self-published books.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just garbage. But that's not the case anymore. It's so easy to hire editors. Most people who self-publish find somebody to do their editing or layout or create their cover. They find someone to do the proofreading. I mean, these aren't just people who are taking garbage material and just printing it. That's just not the case
Exactly.
anymore.
Yeah. It's
So,
not the old the term vanity press, which they used to throw around a lot.
mhm,
And I think independent the quality of a lot of the independent stuff that you see out there is pretty high now.
it
One
is.
so I actually entered my debut book in Mark Lawrence's SPFBO, the self-published fantasy blog off a couple
Mm,
years back. I got into the finals in that and in 2018, and
wow.
that was terrific. And that was again the the flip side of that is you meet a lot of other writers and you get a lot of it's a lot of community that you get exposed to, which is great. I also learned a lot because my book kind of sailed out of its little peaceful, familiar waters into a broader group of fantasy readers. And a lot of things were pointed out that had not occurred to me. Um,
Wow.
so it was definitely a learning experience. I definitely can't recommend it enough. There are a bunch of contests out there, and I think you should try to enter them. You have a thick skin, know that you're going to get some bad critiques, but it's exposure and it's a learning process. And
Think that's another barrier that I see in people who write, but they're afraid. They're so afraid to share what they've written because they don't want those bad critiques. Somehow it feels to them like it's a personal rejection. Writing is very personal.
it
These are
is.
our thoughts that come from up here, and we are exposed in some way when we put that out for the world to see. And I think there are just some people who have this fear that if you tell me my writing isn't as good as I think it is, and now you have rejected me. It took
Yeah.
it took a little bit from even me to get over that and to understand that no, these are valuable suggestions if I really want to sell more books. This is
Yeah.
valuable.
It's tough. I wrote an editorial about that. And I compare it to boxing, where it's one of the things you got to learn form and you got to learn technique. But one of the biggest things you have to learn is you have to learn to take a punch because you're gonna get hit.
You are,
Well, it's
yeah,
gonna happen.
yeah.
Not everybody's gonna love your stuff.
But then
And
there are people that will.
yeah,
And those are the moments that inspire me to keep writing. When
oh,
somebody says
absolutely.
to me, I loved your book, I can't wait to get another one, those types of things.
Absolutely. And again, no matter what you write, you're gonna get people are gonna love it and people are not gonna love it. So you have to accept that. And like you said, the good stuff, let the good stuff inspire you and propel you forward.
Yeah.
And with the negative stuff, I sort it into two groups. There's the negative stuff that's just unhelpfully negative, and it's usually they didn't like your stuff. They were
Because
never,
it just wasn't for them.
it wasn't for them. It's not
Right.
them. It's not you, it's me kind of critiques. Don't worry about that. That's just wrong person picked up the book. When it's something that you get a bad critique and look at it and be like, is that really valid, or did they just not like that kind of book? And That's the useful stuff. It's the harder stuff to hear, but it's stuff that will make your writing that much better if you can take it and learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get your first book published.
Yep.
When was that?
That was 2012.
2012.
And that was out of nowhere, which, like I said, is the main character is he's a paramedic. He's also immortal, and he has the ability to heal people. And because he's immortal, well, he's effectively immortal. He's really old. He doesn't know if he's immortal, or just long-lived. He's seen throughout history people distrust things they don't understand. So he's not walking around telling people what he can do and showing it off because he doesn't want to be burned as a witch, doesn't want to be studied by the government.
Mhm.
So he figured working as a paramedic, he can heal people and nobody will know. They
Makes
say he's
sense.
injured, he can heal them, bring them to hospital, and that wasn't as bad as we thought, kind of thing. Or that. So it lets him use his gift without drawing attention to himself. And the fact that I did the immortality was I could pull a lot of historical references in because he'd been at various historical events. So I got to use my history degree. I got to use some of my anecdotes from the ambulance, which were a lot of fun. I got to throw some other stuff in there. So that was a lot of fun. And like I said, that's the one that went on. It got into the finals in the fourth self-published blog off. And that one's done pretty well. And then I did a sequel to that, and then I did a military space opera kind of thing.
Wow.
And I've done a like a swashbuckling sword and sorcery kind of pulp fantasy thing.
How fun.
Because I really am, my interests are all over the place, and I want to play in all the sandboxes, so it's hard for me to stick. I think the conventional wisdom is you should write a series, because if you've written 7 books in this series, people like one will buy the next one and buy the next. I want to play in a new sandbox all the time.
I
So
hear
that's kind of where
that.
I go with it.
I hear that. Yeah. Yeah. I've never written in a series. I just
No,
haven't.
I have. I like standalones, and I'd like to read standalones actually, because
Hmm.
a lot of times in a series, when it gets too long, the author kind of boxes themselves in, and sometimes stuff gets redundant, or sometimes stuff has to change.
Well, it
But
not only gets redundant, but I think you get to like book 5 of this series and you start noticing where they've messed up
yeah,
too. Yeah.
so
I
mm,
get it. I get it. I'm not a series writer myself.
no, and
I understand.
I understand. Like commercially, it makes perfect sense, and I
Oh,
understand
absolutely. Yeah.
from a marketing perspective. If you're a marketer and oh, I have the next Tom Clancy book. I know it's going to be espionage. I know it's going to be this. I know that people who bought his other 10 books are going to buy this one. I get that, but it's not what I want to do.
So, on that note, let me ask you something. Have you written a book that you've completed and then missed the characters? We get so invested in the characters that we create. Have you done that? Have you said, "Oh boy, maybe I should write another book using these characters because you miss them?"
I do. Yeah, I definitely have done that. But I like to think of it as sometimes you can go back and revisit it, but it's a lot of times it's not the same. It's like missing people that you're friends from high school, and you treasure those memories, but if you were to go hang out with them again, it's not the same. You moved on to a different
Yeah,
place.
yeah. We grow, we're in different
So I
places,
like to
right?
keep some of it as, you know, I want to remember that for what it was, keep it for what it was, but I don't necessarily feel the need to keep going. Some stuff lends itself more to series than others. Some stuff just wants to be a standalone. It's a story, there's a beginning, middle, and an end.
That's
Everybody's
true.
changed, their life is different, and they're in a new place. And some things um fit series. You look at like detective novels. It's easy to serialize because there's gonna always be another case. Anything can.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's true. So I think you're right. I think it just depends on what you're writing and what your purpose in that particular book might be. All right, so you get this book published and it comes. Do you remember that feeling of holding your very first book in your
oh
hands?
yeah, it's amazing. It's an
What
amazing
was
feeling.
that?
You're on
Yeah,
top of the world.
walk us through that. Tell us about that.
So that's one of those things when you finally get it out and you finally see it, and when you get, your first couple of, you see it available for sale online, you actually hold the book in your hands, and it, you've created a thing. It's don't tell my don't tell my son. I'm going to compare this a little bit to that. It's you're so proud of what you've done.
Hmm.
And again, like having kids, it's going to have its own life. It's going to take a life outside of you. People are going to react to it,
But it's
and
your baby.
it is your baby. And that
Yes.
you
And
feel
so
defensive of it, you feel proud
I've
of
had
it, you feel
several
protective of it.
authors who have compared it to the
Yeah.
birth of a child. And
Yeah.
I would say that's very close. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's better than the birth of my
Yeah,
children. I'm not saying
exactly.
that, but that feeling that I can't believe I created this. I can't believe it is like giving birth. It
Yeah.
just is. There's no other description that fits as well as that.
Yeah.
So you got that book.
Yep.
Then did you have this idea that the book was just going to automatically sell? I think so many of us do. I know I did. I thought, okay, I'm going to write this book. It went up on Amazon. Where are the sales? I had
Exactly.
no
Where's
clue that
my
where why aren't I number one yet? And so I had no idea about marketing. That was like a shock to me. Like now I have to be a marketer. I think that you had said before we started this interview that you wear a lot of hats. What do you
yeah.
mean about that? I'm sure that has to do with book marketing, right?
A lot of it is because you can't, so you've written the book and you've gotten it out there. And the downside of the fact that a lot of the walls have come down and a lot of the gatekeeping isn't there means that there's a lot of books out there.
Mm,
And
yeah.
you need to stand out and be noticed, and you need to find the people that are going to want your specific book, your specific genre, your specific subgenre. And that's tough. Because again, you're trying to cut through a lot of noise and get noticed, and it's it's daunting. There's a lot of information out there, but how much of it is useful is tough, and there's a lot of unscrupulous services that'll
Mm,
like
I'm,
once you start publishing, you'll get emails and you'll get Facebook messages
oh,
daily.
they're
Hey, I can promote
scams.
your book and
They're,
get you,
oh, yeah.
sales.
And
And
there
most of
are,
them,
we just had, last week, we had Adam Fleming on here from
yep,
Victory Vision Publishing, and that's what we talked about. There are so many predators and scams
yeah,
out there. And I think you said it is hard to cut through the noise. And the flip side of that is, I mean, it's hard for us to cut through the noise so that people can
yeah,
learn about our books. But also, it is hard for us to cut through the noise of all of these people who want to take our money from us and with these promises that they're going to get our book known. And isn't that what we want? Is we want our book out there. You know what, Patrick? If it's all right with you on that note, I think we're going to pause for just a minute. I do want us to hear from Victory Vision. So
all
give us
right.
just one second and we're going to go listen to what they have to say and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, are you stuck trying to figure out how to finish writing or publishing your book? Well, let me tell you about Victory Vision Publishing. Victory Vision Publishing is there to help you cross that finish line. They have package plans that are tailor-made just for your individual needs. They have learning opportunities where you can discover ways of overcoming some obstacles that you might have. Adam Fleming is a wonderful CEO, and they are a fully staffed team just waiting to help you edit, lay out, maybe make a cover for your book. Go ahead and join their email list and check out some of the wonderful books and wonderful authors that they have already helped get published. Yep,
Victory Vision is definitely the way to go if you feel stuck and just want some support in getting your book out to the world. You're only one book away from changing the world. victoryvision.org.
Okay, well, we're back. And Patrick, we were talking about marketing before we heard from Victory Vision, and you were talking about wearing a whole bunch of hats and the daunting task that comes along with that.
Yeah. So again, it's not, a lot of us don't necessarily know how to do it, and it's not something, we obviously have a passion to write if we wrote a book. I don't know how many of us have a passion to market. So it's a different kind of work. It's a different mindset. And stuff that works changes so rapidly because algorithms are changing all the time. Um, and it's just tough. And sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle. Sometimes you'll hit the right person and who reviews it on the right website, and they'll have a lot of followers, and you get a big boost out of that. And sometimes it just seems like whatever I do, I cannot give this book away.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So have you ever gone to like book signings? Have you
yeah,
done that?
yeah, we've done a couple of I've gone to a couple of cons local. I did ReaderCon. I did a few science fiction conventions. There was Boscone and Arisia and PortCon in Portland,
Oh,
uh, which some of them are great. They're all science fiction to a greater or lesser extent. ReaderCon is obviously specifically books. The other ones, a lot of booksellers go to them because it's science fiction fantasy, so you're in your right audience. And I've talked to some local bookstores and gotten them to hold copies of my books and had it's a lot of work to set up stuff on the small local end. It's a lot of phone calls, it's a lot of back and forth. And I did readings at my local library and was able to move some books there and sign some books. But you're looking at putting in a lot of time to unload a handful of books. So it's not sustainable as your only business model. It's an additional thing to do.
I think that you have to really be passionate
Yeah.
about writing to continue writing. If you think, because most writers do not end up making a living out of this.
No.
I'm not saying that there aren't writers who do. There
Oh,
certainly
absolutely.
are. But they put in the work. And sometimes it costs them quite a bit of money to get to get the ball rolling, to get that propulsion to where they are, booking out in writing or sorry, signing tours and things like that on a regular and consistent basis. But I don't want to work that hard. I don't. And so for me, writing is an act of love. It's a labor of love. I do it because I'm passionate about it. I want to have things that I can pass down to my grandchildren that I will be remembered by, and my books are the best way to have that
No.
happen. But I don't know. I don't think that I want to be marketing as hard as I see some people doing it for, like you said, no bigger than what the return is. I think people have this idea that authors are making millions of dollars in royalties or sitting at home. They wrote a book and this royalty money is just flooding in somehow. And I might get enough royalty some months to maybe go have a nice dinner,
Yeah.
but I'm certainly not making a living at it.
No. And it's there there is money in writing, but it's concentrated. It's like most entertainment. You have a couple people who do really, really well financially out of it.
Yes. Mhm.
And most people, most writers, it's
It's a
not,
side gig.
yeah, it's a side gig. You're on
It's
it,
a side
you
gig.
can't, make a living at it. It's the same thing with, I think musicians, I think artists, I think most of us, for every person that, for every person who's selling out huge venues, for every Taylor Swift who's a billionaire from singing, there's a lot of people singing in the garage, singing at coffee shops,
Right,
singing out
right.
at the Davis Square bus station for what's being thrown in their hat.
Yeah.
And, but like you said, if you want to do it, I'm going to write regardless. I know that. I'm going to make up stories regardless. Um, it would be nice to make money at it. It would be nice to make a little side income from it. It would be great to be able to pay my bills off of it and not have to do the day job if I didn't want to do the day job. But I'm gonna write what I want to write at the end of the
No
day.
matter
That's
what.
what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one of your most recent books. I want to show the audience this book. We're going to go on over to your Amazon. This is Patrick LeClerc has written The Beckoning Void, and this is your latest book. So tell us a little bit about this one. What is this one about?
okay, so this is it's a alternate history Victorian, basically like a steampunk setting. So it's Victorian age with some more technology. Think about like a Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea level of technology. So they have airships, they have some advanced medical like prosthetics and things that they're doing, but it's largely late 19th century technology. And in this world, um, we have a an evil cult of one of the old gods. They're trying to get this magical book that's going to help them do a ritual to bring the old gods back and plunge the world into darkness. And our plucky band of heroes is trying to stop them. So some of the it's there's a lot going on. I took a lot of inspiration from Victorian science fiction, like I said, Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, uh, some of the Arthur Conan Doyle stuff, and the some of the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos for some of the horrific antagonist. And one of the other pieces of inspiration I found out from reading that Charles Dickens was actually involved in a paranormal investigation society in London called the Ghost Club. And
Really, I
Dickens
didn't
was
know that.
involved in it. Yeah, it's Dickens, Yeats, Arthur
I had
Conan
no idea.
Doyle. So I heard about this and I'm like, well, that has to be in a book. Um, so I
No
have to make
kidding.
a Victorian Men in Black run by famous authors. That kind of had to happen. So playing off that, I took so that this ancient and dangerous book has been stolen by this cult, and we have to assemble a group to get it back. And the group is led by Amelia Dumont, who's an actress, and she's knows Charles Dickens knows her through theater because he was a playwright, and she's got a great ability to charm people and to imitate people and get them to to like her and accept her, which are all traits of an actress, but also of a spy. So she's kind of doing the
Oh,
spy thing. And we recruit a a gang of misfits, found family kind of thing. It feels a little bit like Firefly, a little bit like a Cowboy Bebop, if anybody's familiar with any of that. So I have an airship, and it's piloted by a formerly enslaved person who escaped slavery by stealing a Confederate airship during the Civil War. I based that off of an actual historical character who stole a, a naval ship, sailed it, and surrendered it to the Union blockade um, during the Civil War and got his
oh
freedom
my
that way.
goodness.
That was just a great story. So I had to put somebody based on him there. And then I put a couple of other characters. I have a soldier of fortune who's had gone and fought in India for the East India Company, got his commission, didn't really feel like he was doing the right thing, working, um, felt like he was kind of oppressing the natives more than doing anything good. Went back, fought in the American Civil War, and now he's looking for a noble cause in which to die because
A noble
all of
cause
his
in which to die.
all of his
Okay.
skills, all the things he's good at are not socially acceptable skills. He's good at fighting. He's good at hitting people. He's good at being in the military, but he doesn't want to hit people for the wrong reasons. And somebody accuses him one time of so you found that a man whose talents run for violence is finding it hard to find employment on the side of the angels. And he says, yes, that's basically it.
Oh my
So
goodness.
he's looking for something to do where he can feel useful. He's getting a little older. He's worried he's going to get, too old to do the only things he's good at, and he wants that one last hurrah. The
Oh,
other kind of bodyguard heavy character is a half Afghan, half English woman. Her mother was a daughter of an English diplomat. Her father was an Afghan brigand, and she was actually raised by her father, taught to, ride a horse, use a sword, all that kind of thing. Because after she was out there, she kind of was raised as a boy a little bit so that she wouldn't be, so that you could keep her safe. So now she's come into her own, and what she knows is sword fighting, horseback riding, um, being a bandit. And again, there's not a lot of opportunity for that in polite society. So she's kind of working as a mercenary, and her thing is she just wants to be accepted for what she's good at. She doesn't want to be what she's expected to be good at, which is she's a woman, she's um, half Afghan. She doesn't want to be a servant. She doesn't want to be an exotic um, exhibition. She doesn't want to be like she talks about like Cody's wild Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West shows. She doesn't want part of that. She doesn't want to be an exhibition. She wants to do what she's good at. She's like, I'm excellent with a sword. I'm excellent with a horse. I want to be respected for that. And with this band of people, she's getting that. She's doing, you know, the work of a guard, of a mercenary, and they respect her skills. They see that she's good at what she's doing. And
wow.
so this is kind of a whole band of people that none of them fit well into regular society, but Amelia managed to harness all of their skills, their less savory skills, to make something of a group that can then go on and save the world.
So they come together and they're, pardon me, none of them, they're kind of like this misfit bunch that comes together, but it's all for good.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of one of the themes of it. It's, do you fit in or do you make your own way? And that I think ties in with a lot of the Victorian era, because I like it as a historical era to study because there was so much change, vast change in technology,
Constant change. It was all about change. Yeah.
vast change in social structure. That's when you see the abolition of slavery, you see um, the emancipation of the serfs in Russia, you see the beginning of science and technology really taking the place of a lot of the older just handed down beliefs. The
A lot
world's
of
getting
change. There
smaller
was a lot of
because of
change in tradition too.
exactly, and
So
you
yeah,
see the
mindsets
world.
were changing.
Yeah,
People had new attitudes. Yeah, it was an interesting time.
and the world gets a lot smaller because now with more rapid travel, you're getting a greater um mobility between cultures,
Right.
and mobility between classes is starting.
Mm.
So that's one thing I have. A number of these characters have come from poverty and managed to, by talent, put themselves into a different class.
Cool.
And
Cool, cool,
that's,
cool. I want to
and that,
ask who, I'm going to go back to the screenshot
yeah.
here because I want to know who made your cover. Did you design
So
that yourself or?
I did not. I gave the idea for it. Caleb Clark was the artist, and he's under J Caleb Designs, I want to say.
Okay, all right. Well,
And
I'm really intrigued by this part right here. What is this, an umbrella sword?
it is,
It's,
it is
it's
a yes,
intriguing to me.
yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Um,
It's very interesting. And you have like, you can tell that there's this steampunk element to it as well. And I love it. I think that's pretty interesting.
yeah,
So,
he managed to put a lot of the elements of the story onto the cover, which I think was great. I think it really worked out.
yeah. It can be that in itself. Let's talk about that for just a minute. That can be a little bit of a daunting process. I think a lot of people write their books and they're like, what do I do for the cover? They don't have graphic skills, just abilities or whatever that might be. And then I have a book cover that I'm trying to portray what it is that I want, and I don't think I'm explaining it very well. So it can be a little bit stressful if you don't find the right artist that works with you
It's
well.
tough. There are a lot of great artists out there. Um, but as with anything else, it's the really good ones are in demand and they're expensive.
Mhm.
Um, but the cover means a lot. A cover makes a huge difference. It makes a huge impact. So
Yeah, I say there are two things that sell books: titles and covers.
yeah,
If you
I would
can't get
strongly,
past those two things, you're
yeah,
never going to read the book.
I would strongly advise anybody if you're writing a book, put aside some money for a cover. Look at some artists. Look at artists whose style you like, who've done other book covers. And talk to them and make sure there's somebody you can work with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Um,
Yeah. And you want them to understand what it is
yeah,
that your story is about. You want them to know what
exactly.
your story is about, or it's not going to work. It just isn't. So
Yeah. And that's
I
one
want
thing that I
to,
told.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
No,
Patrick. I
no.
just wanted to remind people where they can go. I know we keep showing
Yep.
this on the screen, but I just want to remind our audience because sometimes people, they get so wrapped up in the conversation that they forget. Go on over to Amazon. You can search for this two ways. You can look for Patrick LeClerc, or you can look for The Beckoning Void. And when you get there, when you get to The Beckoning Void, because this story is definitely intriguing and I know you'll want to read it, then you can always go. I clicked on your name, Patrick, and there's a whole bunch of books here. Look
Yeah.
at that. And so you can see out of nowhere, this was your first book. You can see some of the other books that Patrick has written. But yeah, for sure you want to, let's go click on this one again. You want to go check out this Beckoning Void. This is his latest one. And you can get that. Is that available in Kindle now?
It is. It's on
Yeah, okay,
Kindle, it's
Kindle.
on Audible, and it's
Okay.
paperback.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, go check that out and
If you're an
have
audiobook
fun reading
person,
it.
yeah, if you are an audiobook person, I got a great narrator for that.
Really?
Um,
Yeah.
Emily Mount is the narrator, and she does an amazing job. And I threw so much at her at this book because I have a bunch of accents. I threw words in French, Hindi, German at her, and she does all the pronunciations. She did because
Wow.
it's
It's awesome.
they bounce all around the globe. They're picking up all kinds of different people, and she managed to keep it all um really clean. There's also a lot of witty back and forth banter, so it feels a lot like, if you ever watched like the old Thin Man novels with the back and forth, quick, rapid, witty banter, switching accents. She did an amazing job with it. So,
That is good to know. It's hard to find people who they don't just read the book, but they actually
yeah.
kind of get into character for you. My husband, who's a truck driver, reads probably, and this is not an exaggeration, I shouldn't say read, listens to about 100 audiobooks a year.
Oh yeah.
Um, at least that many. So he can tell you who a good narrator is and who isn't. If it's not very well narrated, doesn't keep interest in it for
It makes a
long. So
huge difference if you're
it
listening to
does.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. A lot of people have jobs where they can't necessarily look and read a
Mm,
book, but they can listen to it while they're
right.
working. And
Right.
that's a huge market.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, So again,
That is something that we haven't talked much about to any of my other authors was audiobook. I know Daniel Finkel, he was actually my pilot guest for this show. He's going to be back on in April. He's going to be back on, but his book I listened to his audiobook and it was very well done. But for the most part, I don't think we've had too many conversations on here about the audio part of that and the production of that. And I do know that there are authors who will produce their own. They read their own, and they do just fine. They do a good job as
Mhm.
well. But I think it's hard if you want those accents and you want all of that cultural
Yeah,
stuff to be put in there and acted out correctly. So, yeah,
it's like
good.
anything else. It's if if you can do stuff yourself, that's great.
Mhm.
In fact, one of the authors that's hit really big recently in fantasy, Travis Baldree, who wrote Legends and Lattes, which is a little cozy fantasy. It's a lot of fun. He started out as an audiobook narrator, and that's
Mhm.
what he did. He did voice acting, he did audiobook narration, and he put his first book that he authored out, and it did incredibly well. Um, so if you're the kind of person that's talented in both of those, that's terrific. Same way if you're an artist and you write a book and you want to do your own cover, that's great.
Yeah. Mhm. Know
If
your weaknesses.
But yeah, know what you when you
Know your
need
strengths and your
when you need
weaknesses
help.
and right, exactly. And just get a little bit of humility because that's what
Yeah,
it takes to write and sell. But develop a little bit of humility and say, "Hey, I'm not good at this. Can you help me with that?" And you do have to be willing to pay certain people to do certain things if you want them done at a certain level.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And but look around because there's so many places that you can find
there are.
artists. And so Audible has the Audio Creation Exchange,
Mm,
hcx.com. There's basically a database of authors and narrators, and
right.
you can put up a sample and offer like, hey, this is what I'm willing to pay for someone to do my
Hmm.
audiobook. And if a narrator is interested, they'll read your sample and you can look at that as an audition. And so it's very well facilitated. You can find these people now. But again,
And it didn't used to be as
no,
easy. I mean, now with Fiverr, with
yeah,
Audible, with all of it, with just the internet, period. I think it's so much easier now for people to find what they need. So there just are no more excuses for people not to write and produce a book, right?
yeah,
Because when I was first writing, I didn't know anything. I had no clue. I wrote
no,
this book and didn't know what to do. So what did I do? I got on YouTube.
yep,
University of YouTube. That's what
yeah,
I
yeah,
call it. YouTube
absolutely.
University. How to publish a book, how to get my book on Amazon, and they'll walk you through it. There are plenty of videos out there, plenty of people that will help you if you want to do it all on your own. I have learned I really hate formatting. I'm
Yep,
terrible at it. It's a chore for me. I don't like it.
yep,
So I want to hire that out. I don't want to format my own books
yeah,
anymore. I just don't want to do that. It's not fun for me.
no,
And it's actually one of the things that stops me from finishing my books when I should because I know what's coming next. Like, oh, now the
yeah,
long formatting and cover creation and all of that stuff. So know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and be humble. Just say, I don't know. Let somebody else do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all how much. If you can do it in-house, that's great. If you can do it yourself, if you
Sure.
can't, I bite the bullet and get a professional, because
Yeah.
a professional cover is going to do you so much more service than something that you hack together on your own that's okay, or like you
And
get
and I
it.
would say that has been my personal downfall. I didn't hire the people that I should have. My books, all but one of my books are nonfiction. So that makes a big difference too. Like I wasn't looking for big graphics. I didn't
Right.
need all of that. I didn't need my story told on the cover of the book. But my last book, which was a fiction book, and the one that I'm writing now is also fiction. That's a little bit different. Like I need to step up my game when it comes to that. I need to do better. I need to make sure that I get the right person hired for this.
Yeah,
So,
it
well,
does.
Patrick, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and professionals are worth it.
Hmm.
You get somebody that does it, they're used to working, they work, if they're used to working quick and efficient and listening to what you do, and yeah, it's all the difference in the world between hiring a professional and hiring, somebody that has a little talent but
Well, and
isn't.
you don't want to get that book in your hand and years
Yeah,
later look at it and go, I really could have done a better job with
yeah,
that, you know? So you want it to be nice. Every book is a personal legacy of some
yes,
sort. It is something that you're going to pass down for the next generation. So I think it's worth investing a little bit of something. It's your baby. It's your
yep,
baby. You put a lot of time and effort into it. It may as well be as good as you can get it. Those are important things. That's
definitely.
another, I will say that's one of the other reasons why I thoroughly appreciate Victory Vision Publishing, because they will steer people in the right direction when it comes to things like that. So some of this can be very overwhelming and daunting for people. Like they don't know, oh, how do I go about doing this? And they don't want to think about it. They just want to write. And so then they can turn it over to a place like Victory Vision or hire, good audio people
Yes,
to do that. So, Patrick, it has been a delight having you
thank you.
here. I want to share Patrick's book just one more time before we go. Patrick LeClerc has written A Beckoning Void. That's his latest book. He has other books, but certainly go check this one out on Amazon. We will leave the link in the description. So make sure that you check that out and go get it. You can get that on Kindle, audiobook, or paperback. Patrick, I appreciate you having been here today. I am
Thank you very
thrilled
much
to
for
have
having me.
had you. Yeah, thank you for being here. It's such a good conversation. I love having conversations with authors who are passionate about their writing, and I can tell you definitely are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, listen, you have been watching a book. We've listened to Patrick today, and he got to share with us his latest book. We shared that on Amazon. I will make sure that the link is in the description for you. As always, thank you for watching, and God bless.